In this video series, we're going to explore the ways that masculine and feminine energies oscillate and emerge throughout our history during different times. From art, mythology, and religions, both old and new, including architecture manifesting as a form of a cultural time capsule, embodying the virtues of the time period, be it in a traditional sense or a more reactionary response. Ultimately, the manifestations of these energies end up defining the characteristics of those time periods that we so often like to romanticize in our modern times as a form of escapism. We'll look at how art movements encapsulate these energies, hitting major milestones in Western art history. From medieval art with its focus on rigid composition and hierarchical structure, with spiritual figures being larger than man, focusing on the position of man being below God and divinity, while the Renaissance revives the Greco-Roman thought, focusing on rationality, proportion, and mastery of form over raw emotion. Along with its main themes of balance, symmetry, mathematical perspective, human anatomy, and classical ideas. Later, with Baroque being a fusion of the two energies, with its masculine structure plus its feminine movement, keeping the Renaissance structure but infusing theatrical emotion, making it both rational and passionate. With Rococo and its soft pastels and whimsical playfulness and flirtatious atmosphere and flowing curves. And we'll also look at mythology and archetypes and how deities are personifications and embodiments of these archetypal energies, like Apollo being the embodiment of traditionally masculine principles, being related to the sun, being viewed as a shepherd and having governance over domesticated animals and civilization, while his sister Artemis is associated with the moon, the wild and untamed, paralleling the subconscious mind, and how the yin and yang and the yin within the yang and the yang within the yin are even paralleled by two other great deities. Dionysus, the feminine within the masculine being the male, but embodying the intoxicating expression of subconscious desires and fulfillment. While Athena is the masculine within the feminine, being a goddess of wisdom, and not being born in their traditional sense, but being sprung from Zeus's head, valuing logic, strategic thinking, and rational thought, often being associated with societal structures and civilizations. We can also see these different energetic expressions shown in economic structures, and how these structures can be viewed as circuits, facilitating the flow of energy within a circuit. In this case, the energy is money, and the circuit being the economic system of that country, and what values that system prioritizes as a virtue and a cornerstone for a functioning system and society. With socialism being feminine, prioritizing nurturing and caring aspects like welfare and social services, as well as being more adaptable and fluid in response to outside influences, with a focus on community and well-being and a type of village mentality, where the strength of the collective is viewed as the force that can help everyone. But at the same time, if there is a overindulgence, it can lead to stagnation and a over-reliance on certain structures for that society and a suppression of the individuality for the sake of conformity. While capitalism is the masculine expression, prioritizing profit above all else as the highest virtue and an emphasis on hyper-individuality while at the same time tricking people into chasing this hyper-individual expression and fulfilling it through ultimately incredibly useless and shallow ways, like clothing or cars or what type of grocery store you can shop or afford to, leading to an exploitation of resources, be it at individual people, leading to burnout, or the resources of the planet. While it does fuel innovation and expansion and growth, a necessary balance to the stagnation within the feminine socialist energy, leaning too heavily into this can lead to a natural exploitation, greed, and inequality, with a drive for dominance overshadowing the collective well-being of the society. Both of these forms of energetic expression have very good qualities that we can see in the real world, like Silicon Valley, leading to the largest technological evolution in the history of the human race, while ultimately being at the expense of other countries who have to mine the natural resources to facilitate the creation of these computer components and chips, and taking away from their own natural resources as well as the planet's for overproduction as it helps drive profit margins. And then there's also the individual rise of entrepreneurs, which allows for more individual expression, allowing people to create the life it is that they want to live, but also putting them in the financial constraint of a ever-increasing inflation rate while trying to manage this new level of wealth. While on the socialist end, we have smaller collective movements like community gardens and eco-villages, people trying to live off the land and have as little impact as possible, while at the same time creating a more robust society and economic system by not being so reliant on social structures that have been put in place by capitalism, such as grocery stores and gas or petrol stations. And I would like to note that earlier I had mentioned that a over-reliance on social structures would be a byproduct of overly expressed feminine energies when mentioning socialism. Now, when these energies are expressed out of balance, they can manifest in multiple ways, irregardless of whichever one is dominant at the time, as long as it helps facilitate the growth of that energy until it reaches a point of collapse. Another positive example of feminine socialist movements and energy would be the Scandinavian model in Europe. But it is actually quickly diminishing, and it was still allowing for a large amount of individual expression and worker rights for every person. We can also see this mixing of energies in countries like Japan, with capitalism being their form of economics, while culturally they have a extremely feminine energy, in the sense that societal conformity is not only encouraged, but outright expected. This mix of energy, when looking at Japan's case, we can see comes from the fact that they have grown up in the East, having a much larger influence from Taoism and Buddhism, as well as Shintoism. Now, the East has always had a far more intuitive, reflective, feminine expression of cultural, societal, and individual values, versus the West, tending to have a more outward, innovative expression of individuality and dominance, with historically the West viewing nature as something to impose one's will upon and conquer and bend to their liking, versus nature being seen more in a symbiotic relationship and a co-creative, co-collaborative effort, with the ideas of qi and feng shui being prominent in their cultural values. We can see this dichotomy expressed historically and in modern approaches to spirituality. In the West, we used to have a more pantheon style of deities, each one having differences in archetypal embodiments, as well as having what were referred to as daemons. These are not demons in the traditional Christian sense, but more so a catch-all umbrella term used to refer to spirits that would be between man and God. You could think of dryads, nymphs, or elves and gnomes. So creatures of folklore, but as monotheism rose, all these creatures were viewed as being the other and ultimately being labeled as evil, contributing to the black and white thinking of us versus them, the self and the other, as Christianity rose in dominance and prevalence. While in Shintoism, the spirits never truly disappeared. They come in many forms and scales. They are called kami, and they could be a kami of a rock, or a waterfall, or a mountain, or even large astrological bodies like the moon or the sun. We can see this nuanced way in which the individual relates to the world around them in a spiritual and subjective, intuitive level, and how this forms the social structures that they exist in, both on a individual and collective basis. My point being that these energies, masculine and feminine, can manifest in many forms, and it's not as black and white as one is good and one is bad. To have such a mentality is to be extremely reductionist, and we must recognize that economic systems are incredibly intricate and multi-layered circuits, often forming not only in response to outside influences of the country, but through the natural process of creation and destruction, ultimately being formed by the conscious and subconscious levels of awareness of the individuals that make up these circuits, both on the large scale, from the prime ministers and presidents and government officials, to the small scale, the individual entrepreneurs and small businesses, and even the people working the 9-to-5 job. We can see this energetic play out in more modern forms of reactionary responses. You can look at the game Cyberpunk 2077, focusing on inequality and overindulgence and hyper-individuality, trying to make it in Night City as a one of 1,000, 10,000 mercenaries. While on the other end of the spectrum, we could have the art movement of solarpunk, focusing on village life and smaller scale societal structures and more intimate relationships that we would build with people in our everyday lives. With video games, we could see this with Harvest Moon or Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing. This is why people are so drawn to these games as a form of escapism. So these video games, encapsulating this energy that is largely absent in their everyday waking lives, provides a desperate respite, whatever. A little vacation. So I want to end this introductory video on a note. Why do you like the things that you like when you really think about it? What energy does it encapsulate, and how is it expressed? This will show you what it is in your everyday life that you need more of, that your body, on a subconscious level, is screaming out for you to notice, rather than simply trying to fill this energy through simple forms of escapism, like video games or certain types of literature. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I do both myself. It's just that you should focus on why you have the hobbies that you do and what brings you joy. And think, how is it that I can take something from those hobbies or the media that I enjoy and actually bring it into my everyday life. If you love the slow life of Stardew Valley or Animal Crossing, I'm not saying you have to immediately go and move to the countryside unless you want to, but just start a garden. It doesn't even have to be a big one. And if you live in an apartment, that's okay too. You can just bring in some plants. Just start with some herbs or something. Maybe a little terrace garden. And if you enjoy more masculine expressions, so let's say you've always liked mid-century design, then maybe there's something on a subconscious level that you're craving as far as some form of structure that is somehow lacking in your life. Ultimately, the purpose of this video and this entire series that I'm going to start is that I want you to question why you like the things you like and what you can do to bring your imagination into reality. By going on every day and escaping through media and bringing your imagination and fantasy into reality, into your living life, and creating a life that you love. And the first way to do that is to recognize the overarching patterns throughout history. Golden ages come about when there is a balance of masculine and feminine, of co-creation. So if you can balance your masculine and feminine within, you can turn your life into its very own golden age. If you like this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, leave a comment. And if you want to help support me some more, I will have a link down below to a GoFundMe and my Patreon. I hope you all have a fantastic day.